Welcome to the DPM podcast, where we go beyond theory to give expert PM advice for leading better digital projects. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Ben Aston, founder of the Digital Project Manager. So client needs are maturing, and the role of digital agencies is changing and evolving too. And as the website design and build process has become more commoditized, there's this growing need for agencies who can be more than just a website partner, but can be a strategic and technical partner too, to build not just websites and campaigns and landing pages. So in today's podcast, we're going to nerd out a bit on portal builds, what they are, how you build them, and some takeaways and lessons learned if you're going to embark on one of these projects. So keep listening if you want to get the lowdown on the evolution of digital agencies and a product development approach to client engagements. This podcast is brought to you by Clarizen, the leader in enterprise project and portfolio management software. Visit clarizen.com to learn more. Today, I'm joined by Rebecca Germond, and Rebecca is the Director of Client Services at FCV. And she's got a strong foundation in project management and media communications. And Rebecca is actually someone that I hired a few years ago. And I actually remember your interview where I brought you in the room and I was like, yep, sure, I'll hire this girl. And I don't really remember what I asked you, but I was like, I don't even need to interview you. You're hired. Do you remember the interview?
I remember the interview. I felt like I was grilled. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I remember it really well because I remember the view from the office, and that was what sold me, I think, on FCV.
It wasn't me. It was the view.
Yeah.
So Rebecca, for those who are wondering kind of what you do every day, what is Director of Client Services about? Is it project management? Is it account management? What does that mean for you right now?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, plus managing the actual PM team, which is, it's cool. It's a new role for me over the last year or so. And I don't get my hands as dirty with projects as much anymore. There are a few that I won't let go of. But really I get to work directly with the PMs and make sure that, they're able to deliver, and, give them the support they need. And as well, I manage, most of our clients. So I have a pretty good, like an account managing relationship with them. And that's actually, I started in accounts before I became a producer project manager. So a little bit back to my roots, which is cool.
Nice. And so, for those who are interested in kind of this role of managing a team of project managers, so like day in, day out, what does that look like? What, how do you manage them? Because you can't be in the details of all their projects all the time. So when you're checking in with them, what do you actually do?
Yeah, that's great. So what I do is, for the most part, I just review a lot of work or deliverables that they want to send. So, for example, I will give them feedback on an SOW or a timeline. If there's any ever like escalations, I get involved, or I help help the PMs navigate how to respond to any sticky situations. I meet with them on a one-on-one basis, like weekly. But then I also kind of connect over Slack and just make sure everybody feels supported on a day-to-day basis. And then occasionally I'll come and join their like more important client meetings. So it's just a little bit of that. And then as well, I'm heavily involved in our business development process at FCV. And I also work on the day-to-day with, how much are we actually going to invoice our clients? And, are we making sure we're keeping track of our change management process enough, and a lot of other things than just kind of the day in, day out with the PMs as well.
Yeah. So, tell us a bit about your story. So you said your background was in account management, and actually I know you started off your career in the Ministry of Labour. So how did you go from Ministry of Labour to digital agency and account management to project management? What did that look like for you?
Totally. When I was in school, my aunt has a like a temp agency. She would place me with jobs where I was trying to find the right place. And I knew I wanted to work in an agency. So I did get a placement with the Ministry of Labor, and it was more like an admin job for the government, but it was pretty cool. It made me learn a lot of ins and outs for the government, which actually helps me later on in my career, because most of the projects that I worked on at my first agency, and now a lot of the projects I'm working on now at FCV, are government related. So that's it was helpful. But then, one time she got me placed at an agency, Manifest Communications in Toronto, and I was only to do like a 2-week temp front desk work while someone was on vacation. And they asked me to stay on for an internship, which is like what I was trying to nail anyways. So I did that for 3 months, and then they hired me on, and I worked there for 4 years. And when I first started, I was in an account executive. So I was managing clients and less so digital projects. Like, we slowly moved into that. So after my first year, I became a producer, and it would probably be about 60% digital, but then I also got to work on radio and broadcast and some print stuff too, which was pretty cool.
Nice. And I mean, tell me, kind of, we're still kind of in the first quarter of the year. Like, from your like career perspective or growth perspective, we're talking today about portals and how that's kind of a bit of an evolution, but have you got any kind of goals that you set yourself for the year?
Yeah. I don't actually, it's funny. I don't really want to have any specific career goals this year. It sounds weird. I'm in my last year of my 20s. So I really just want to like live like a millennial. I have some travel goals. So that's kind of what's up for me. But I really, in terms of career, like, I've loved working on this portal project, and we've turned it into like a product, and we are constantly, doing releases and trying to build on something. And I think it's really great. And I would love to do more work like that. So, yeah.
Cool. And let's talk about, I mean, we talked about a bit about what your role is in terms of what you do, but what are the kind of challenges that you maybe are dealing with right now, or, what's your biggest headache that you're trying to overcome on a day-to-day basis, or particularly now with a particular project or something?
Yeah, I think on a day-to-day basis for me, it's I'm used to kind of like babysitting in a project team environment, if you know what I mean. Like, we all are as project managers. We have to kind of deal with a lot of egos and or just different personality types. But now I think on the scale where it's less projects, and it's actually, everyone throughout the organization has different needs, and everyone has different priorities, and just trying to juggle that with, as well, making sure that the PMs like have what they need, because that's super important. I find that's just a bit difficult. And then as well, you get wrapped into things that you maybe don't think are such a big deal, like admin stuff, or I don't know. So it's just trying to, keep track of my own to-do list is a struggle these days.
How do you keep track of things? What does your to-do list look like? Have you got a system?
Yeah, so I do have. I use most of my to-do lists in Evernote, but we've just added a new like Slack integration called Workcast, which you can keep your to-do lists in an actual Slack channel, and then assign things to them if you need. But you can also just like write a note to yourself in Slack, and your to-do list is there, and it'll give you a reminder about when things are due. We're like really early on using it, but so far it's pretty cool. And that's called Workcast? Workcast, like WORKAST.
Okay, Workcast. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a funny name, Workcast.
Definitely. But so far so good. But yeah, I think the problem is you don't get to your to-do list until either before 9 or after 5 p.m. That's how I feel, because everyone, like 70% of my day is either meetings on the phone or responding to emails in Slack, which makes it really hard to be productive these days.
Yeah. And so, I mean, what else is in your PM toolkit? You've got your new to-do list system. which is obviously helping you prioritize the really important stuff.
Yeah.
But how, what else is in your toolkit? How do you manage projects?
So I've got quite a few tools, and I would say, like, flipped back and forth on a few over the last couple of years where we work. And now I'm pretty happy with what we've got. So like I said, I use Evernote. We use Jira pretty seriously now. So everybody, including our like UX and design, and all of our clients are in Jira, which makes it easier for us, because everything's at least in one spot and we can keep track of tickets. We use Slack, and I use that pretty religiously. Microsoft Teams we're testing out instead of Skype for Business. So we're just using it in a conference line kind of setting for our meetings with clients. And it's been working out pretty well. I use Merlin for project scheduling. We used to use MS Project, but I just find we're only using like 15% of its capabilities. And so we keep a couple MS Project licenses floating around just in case a client needs it. And then, Spotify, that's definitely in my toolkit. Need that. And I guess Outlook, although email is the bane of my existence.
So apart from Workcast, are there any other tools that you've come across recently, or things that are kind of revolutionized the way that you manage projects?
Not really. I think the way that we've now used Jira as like, actually we're integrating, we're using integrations in our Slack channels. So if a ticket is updated, the status has changed. If a client comments on it, obviously Jira sends you like 40 emails a minute about, when something is updated. So this is only the key things are sent to the Slack channel. So, if someone's made a comment on a ticket. So that's really made it easy because no one's reading those Jira emails. And then, MS Teams is actually pretty cool because most of our clients didn't want to use video, but now there's like a lot of them that have taken it on from when we've moved over to MS Teams.
Nice. That's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's talk about your post, your case study, the first case study we have ever published. So congratulations, Rebecca.
Oh, thank you.
But let's talk about a portal.
Mm-hmm.
And is a portal just a website, or is it different? Why? And if it is different, why and how is it different?
So for me, I think portals are pretty complex because they're generally tailored to a lot of different users, which all of those different users may have many actions or features or journeys for each. And for this particular portal, there was 3 different user levels that we needed to keep in mind, and how they would impact one another was something that I think we underestimated at first. So I think for portals in general, they can get pretty complex just because of, all of the different ins and outs that may not be something that you would just get on a regular website if you just hit it and check out the homepage. So,
okay, so it's what we're talking about is something where there's kind of richer interactivity in terms of role-based kind of functionality that is either enabled or disabled depending on what you're doing in the portal.
Exactly. And for us, for our portal in particular, unless you had a login, you're not getting much from the homepage. So there's some barriers in place, and it's not necessarily easy to onboard new clients into the portal. There's a lot of things to keep in mind that just don't apply to a regular website.
Interesting. So we're not talking in abstract. So give us kind of a brief overview of the functionality of what this portal is.
Perfect. So this portal, basically our client, I'll give you a little background. They're an electronics retailer, and they have B2B clients, so businesses who like to order products from them in bulk. But prior to having any portal environment, they were basically picking up the phone and calling their account manager and placing an order like really, really, really manually. And it was giving everybody headaches. It was giving the clients headaches because no one wants to pick up the phone anymore. So what they were looking for was some sort of portal where people can log in, people can see a catalog of products that's been assigned to them and only be able to shop from those products. As well, there's a complicated discount mechanism applied on them because if we didn't have the portal and we didn't have this discount, people could just go shop at their consumer website and buy what they needed. Because they're buying in bulk, they're getting pretty tailored discounts based on, how much they buy and what they do. So that's one aspect. Then we also have a checkout. We have a dashboard where people can see their most frequently ordered products. They can see, open orders that they have, anything that's, been placed in the last 30 days. There's some cool tools on the dashboard to help make them see what's going on in their world on the portal. And then as well, there's a few different user levels within who can just shop. So most of the clients can go in and place an order, but then you would need a client admin to approve it depending on their organization. So that's before an order goes through. People need to be able to, approve it or let them know, sorry, you're exceeding our budget. So, we can't put this order through. So there's a lot of ins and outs there as well.
Interesting. So essentially this is, say I'm a large organization, I'm TELUS, and I want to order 2,000 new monitors or something. I just log into the system, buy my monitors, but then there's a approval checkout process thing as well. And then I can kind of track my order. Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of e-commerce at scale.
Yep, exactly.
Cool. And so in the post, you talked a bit about, using some interesting tech. And I'm wondering if you can give us the Coles notes on, the tech stack, the architecture, and what the solution is, like how you actually built this, like what made it interesting.
Cool. Yeah. Definitely our devs could speak to it a little bit better, but I can give us a little high overview.
The PM version.
Yeah. So we're using .NET Core to power microservices. And then we used React on the front end to actually provide the interfaces of that, of those microservices. So basically what we mean is, those microservices are just endpoints. So you can reuse them in any way you want. So for example, you're getting data from, the volume of orders. Just because we have that information, that's how we can spit it out on the dashboard, or we can manipulate this data in many, many different ways, which is really cool. And then obviously, React is really exciting for our front end developers, and they really liked working on it. And when we used React, we created a component library that we could leverage. So different areas of the site, so we didn't have to constantly rebuild the same components. And as well, we wanted to provide a really consistent look and feel throughout the site, and something that was still on brand to them, and didn't feel like too much of a departure from their consumer website.
Cool. So in terms of, so there is no CMS. And so how was that process of, so within .NET, you've created the functionality for I guess the retailer to be able to add products and edit products, and how is there a CMS for that side of it? How does that work?
And what the beautiful thing is, all of the product information or product data is coming from a client's provided API that they use on their consumer website. So all of that product information is updated all the time. So we have a script or something that is running once a day to just make sure that we're getting the most up-to-date price and the most up-to-date product information on specs and that kind of stuff as well. So it's a completely automated process when it comes to the adding a new product, which is pretty cool.
That's cool. So this was product development, building out a portal. That was something new. So tell me how you planned out the project or the product development? What was your kind of process for trying to plan out this build?
Yeah, so definitely we took an MVP approach, like minimum viable product, which worked and didn't, because I feel like as the project went on, what became the MVP kept growing. So it wasn't really minimum at all, but at the start, and when we really like planned out the timeline and the estimate, the MVP approach helped us quite a bit. And then, yeah, we because we had a pretty defined backlog, we jumped right into development sprints. We didn't take it too long of a requirements gathering with this project. What we would do was we would tackle the requirements in a sprint planning meeting for the features that we were going to, attempt to complete during that sprint.
Okay, so in terms of like the MVP, was there a budget and a deadline for the MVP, or how? I mean, if you've got a backlog of stuff to build, how are you working out, what's within budget and what's out the budget? Like, at what point did you define the kind of budget for that? Because I think that's one of the big challenges here.
It really was, because, and I think the hard thing with working agile in an agency setting is the clients want to see a price for everything. And true agile, it's like maybe a cost per sprint model. And at the end of a sprint, you might not have a complete feature. So the way we had to kind of attempt to tackle the estimate was give them more of like an a la carte per feature. So they knew exactly how much a specific feature would cost, so they could prioritize them themselves if needed. But some of those features were dependent on others. So once we kind of figured exactly what came in the MVP, that's how we determined the cost and exactly what we had to do in order for, all of those dependencies to kind of work out as well. And then based on that cost by a la carte pricing, we tried to like bulk it up a bit so it could work in a sprint model. And we knew we had 5 months to complete the project with a month of UAT at the end. So, and I think we did like 2 weeks of just environment setup and that kind of thing. So I think we had like 6 or 7 sprints total.
Okay. So I know one of the things that you mentioned in the case study is that you massively underestimated some of the mandatory features, but you said that's what made it fun. So what I'm reading in between the lines, and you did this a la carte, but you underestimated some of those a la carte items. So how and why were they underestimated, do you think?
So I think the biggest one that we underestimated was the actual catalog building and then applying the discount on top. For us, we were like, oh yeah, we're just adding a discount to, specific products. But when you get into the nitty gritty of their API and all of the different categories of products they have, all the different facets, that logic coupled with a discount on top of it got really, really, really complicated. And then there was another layer to it where they wanted to actually exclude some products. So for example, Apple, they didn't make a huge markup on it, so they would never want to discount an Apple product. So we had to make sure that if they said exclude brand Apple from this, then you would only surface products with these like characteristics and not Apple, plus add the discount on top. So it got really, really confusing and complicated. And unfortunately, with this client, it was more of a fixed price engagement. So where we were able to make our money back or get time as well was with a lot of change requests that they added along the way, or even change requests to features that were included in the a la carte. So we did our best when needed to keep on top of that change management process. But when it comes to just ourselves underestimating, it's really hard to kind of go back to the client and say, sorry, we just didn't exactly do our job right. So
yeah, I mean, part of that though is the fact that the requirements, I mean, it sounds like some of the complexity around some of the discounting might not have been clear right from the start, right?
Exactly. And I think when we did those, like the initial requirements, the discount engine or whatever it was we were building was supposed to be a lot less involved. Yeah. So it just got a little bit hairy once we dug in a little bit more.
And I think this is often the case, though, with more agile projects, right? We're the whole point of running a project in a more agile manner is that it suits a scenario when, hey, things aren't entirely black and white, but then it needs a kind of cost model to reflect that. But obviously here you're working with a fixed price and unclear requirements. So based on what you know now, how would you plan it differently next time?
Yeah, I think I feel like I think we did a good job with the requirements that we had, and I think what I'd like to attempt with this client, and we're getting we have an awesome working relationship now, and we've he gets it, and he's really just an extension of our team, which makes things like super, super helpful. So we're trying to sell things in a more cost per sprint model. We're not really getting there, but we are able to. We have a lot of ability to like wiggle with the timeline with him, and he's just really understanding, and which is great. But if we were to start this over again next time, I think maybe even if we could give them like a rough ballpark at the beginning, because what they need is they need to be able to get some sort of number approved, right?
Yeah.
So if we give them a good range, and then during each sprint we could more like if you estimate what we're going to tackle in that sprint and kind of give them a price per sprint, depending on how many team members we needed and what we were hoping to get done. That might be better. But overall, like I wouldn't change much about how we operated on the team. I liked how lean we were. I liked how few of us there was. And it gets difficult if there's a lot of people involved on the client side. And it was really just him and the appropriate stakeholder that needed to be involved for whatever feature we were tackling in the sprint. So that was very cool as well.
Cool. And so, I mean, you talk about, you're talking about a small team there, and that was one of the things that worked well. And in your post, you talk about this hybrid agile approach to development and design. Can you tell me what that actually looked like? Like in terms of who was on the team? This is a small team. But how did you make that design development thing work?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I think in agency setting in general, it's really, really difficult to go full agile. Like at least I find it is, because clients are not really open to paying for a team for 5 months straight. Like they want to know what the feature is going to cost. They're not really selling a team. It's hard to kind of change that perspective. If you're in-house and you're building your own product, and you have dedicated people to be involved, 24, like whatever, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, then it's a little bit different. But when you have multiple projects involved, it's really, really, really hard to work in Agile. But what our team looked like and how we kind of had a hybrid approach, we had 2 back end, 2 front end, a halftime UX, and a designer who probably came in like once in a while just to vet our creative or our features, and then 1 QA, which would also generally be working halftime during the sprint, like 50% dedicated. We didn't use a BA, which I still think is okay. I don't think it was really to our detriment, because we knew what we were building. And I don't think really a BA would have been able to tell us the ins and outs of like their API or anything like that. Like, I don't think that would have helped us with actually the estimation process. So I think that helped us. And we didn't have a strategist involved because the product was really cut and dry, and the client had a pretty well-defined vision for the MVP. And there was like a strong use case behind it, of course. So that was kind of the team. Oh, and me, of course.
Yeah.
And then how we kind of approached it.
Yeah.
We had, we didn't, because we were starting from scratch, we had no components already built for this. We basically just had like a brand guideline to go use to go off of for anything that they wanted, and then the features. So we had design and UX actually working a sprint above, like in front of, ahead of the dev team, which I think in a true agile, like you wouldn't really get that. You would try and deliver a feature together. But the client had never seen anything we'd ever done before. So we really needed to give them a little bit of a head start to make sure that, we were on the right track with look and feel and that kind of stuff. And then we used that first sprint where design and UX were working ahead for our environment setup and anything that we needed to get, because it was a brand new deployment pipeline we needed, and all of these kinds of project setup things that the devs needed to tackle. So on the other hand, our client's organization does work agile, or they try to internally. So it wasn't like hard for them to grasp, and they really enjoyed the working style. And then when it came to, all of the agile ceremonies, like that stuff that we still tackled for sure. Things like scrums, mid-sprint reviews, demos, retrospectives. We all took it pretty seriously, and the client joined all or most of them.
Nice. I mean, and let's talk about the client so the great thing about this scenario was that the client, I mean, they were the product manager, right? So you didn't have a whole bunch of stakeholders. You had a single stakeholder, which was cool. And you mentioned they were great, but also you said in your post that, the client dreamt up some new features and tasks along the way. So when you're working with this fixed budget, but an agile approach where it's totally fair for them to dream up new features and tasks. How did you manage that?
Yeah, it was definitely difficult. But anytime he would dream up a new feature, he would give us, he would understand that it's a CR and that we needed to quote on it. So the problem was it made it pretty difficult to stop work from what you're doing on the sprint and get them an estimate, because like they need the estimate in order to approve the feature. So yeah, it made things a little interesting. But the client in general, yeah, he was the main product owner, I would say, and he his team gave him like full autonomy of how to run the project and work on it. I think that they were planning it for quite some time before we came on board, and it was really good that they brought us in when they did, because we were able to give them feedback and ideas on new features and things that they hadn't really considered. And he definitely had some fun features to bring to the table in the middle of nowhere, but they were all things that were like super, super important. For example, I think prior to the build, they were still anticipating to manually onboard these clients. So, send them a PDF with like information on signing up and that kind of stuff. So what we decided probably after the third sprint was we wanted to do some sort of like setup wizard, so people could actually come in, get a login and password from an email that we send them. They can come on, reset their password. They can download all of the forms that they needed to fill out and re-upload them to the system. It made it a little bit easier for their team to manage. So although, we weren't really anticipating it, it made the overall product like pretty awesome.
That's cool. And you talked about like, obviously, the some of the lessons learned. So one of the things you said was, keep your team engaged and your client involved. It sounds like the client was really involved, but what would your tips be for kind of maintaining and driving that engagement in the first place?
Yeah, I think for us as well, like the whole working style, the way we've attempted this is kind of new for FCV, because a lot of our clients are legacy clients or government clients, and they've been working with us for years and years and years, but they are stuck in their ways. So the way we got our client engaged and involved, actually paid off really well, because we saw that, clients actually want to be involved like this to this level. So it was really interesting. And also we wanted him to be engaged because we wanted there to be a phase 2 of this project. Like we really wanted, to continue this. We saw that it's not just a website like that has an end at the end of its life cycle. This is a living, breathing thing. So keeping him engaged that way was good. Keeping the team engaged. Like, they really wanted to work on this because they got to pick their tech stack. They got to do something new. They got to, pick their own tools. They also enjoyed having a platform to speak to the client, which some people wouldn't. It depends on your team, but, we've got our client in Slack. He's able to, just bounce ideas off, our front end developer or whoever needs to be there. So it works well. And I think they're engaged that way because they're building something they actually really, really care about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and one of the things you talked about was, in terms of your lessons learned, were shedding processes you don't need, but embracing the ones you do. And you talked about the fact that one of the benefits of the project was, the refinement it had on project process in the agency. So, can you tell me about any kind of process that you dropped, or any of that kind of refinement that you were able to integrate then back into other projects?
Yeah, for sure. So I think after our second sprint retrospective, we decided against doing them. We're like, all right, we know what we're doing well and what we're not. Taking the time to do this now isn't really helping. It's just pulling time away from dev, which is not what we wanted. And as well, it's like, because our client was so involved, he could give us that feedback throughout if something wasn't working for him, or we should adapt our process or think about something for the next sprint. So that one is something that we really, we shedded pretty early. Also, it was really difficult for us to do scrums because half of our team was in Toronto and half of them are in Vancouver. So it makes things hard. But we really tried to honor the fact that, to unblock people, it's better to just jump on a 15-minute scrum than try and do it via Slack for an hour. So,
so you just had a random, scrums were not like a daily 9 a.m., 12 p.m. ceremony. They were just ad hoc.
So we did have like 9:30 and we tried to make it work. But once we got into a groove, then it would just be ad hoc or, just jumping into Slack and asking some questions. We probably kept it up for like 3 sprints doing our scrums daily. But then we went to either every other day or, via Slack.
Cool. And is there any kind of process that you tried dropping because you're like, hey, we don't need this, but then you added back in after realizing that, that was a bad idea?
Not really, but I know like one of the processes that we wish we got, like just general that we wish we got involved on sooner was having QA. We really didn't have anything until the 3rd sprint that was like ready for QA, and we probably should have got that started a little bit sooner. And I remember like there was a couple demos that were just working to like 5 minutes before and committed some code, and you're like just hoping it sticks and hoping it works. So, that was, we were working like cowboys at the end of it, but it was really fun.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great having you with us.
Thank you. Anytime.
Pleasure. So if you're interested in portal builds, check out the case study that Rebecca has written up. There's a load of information in there that you might find helpful. And if you want to chat about portal builds, head as well to our Slack team. Go to thedigitalprojectmanager.com/Slack, and you'll find all kinds of interesting conversations going on there about all things digital PM. I'd also like just to say, if you enjoyed today's show, please go to Apple Podcasts, formerly known as iTunes, or you can go there and leave a review. But we'd really love your feedback, and ratings and reviews are really helpful, and it'll help us tailor the show. But until next time, thanks for listening.